At dinner, Dad said, "Your sister is driven and independent. You're still freelancing, right?" I replied, "Cool, then I'll cancel the $3,500 per month she gets from me." Silence fell. You know that feeling? When a lifetime of being overlooked, of quietly enabling someone else's carefully constructed lies, finally just snaps? For me, that breaking point hit hard, right in the middle of Seattle's most pretentious Italian restaurant, and it wasn't just the tiramisu that ended up getting ruined. The white tablecloth gleamed under those soft, expensive lights at Bellini's. Outside, Puget Sound stretched out, hammered silver under the evening sky. I was just sipping my Cabernet, letting the tannins linger, but honestly, my attention was totally fixed on the performance unfolding across the table. My dad, Thomas Porter, raised his glass. The signet ring on his finger caught the light, and even at 58, he still had that commanding presence, the kind of man everyone just listens to. He announced, his voice carrying just enough to make heads turn at nearby tables, to my Brielle. And there she was, my 27-year-old sister. Responsible, independent, a true professional success. She sat straighter in her perfectly tailored burgundy blazer, her smile a masterpiece of practiced perfection. The golden child, soaking in that familiar, intoxicating praise. She even tucked a strand of honey blonde hair behind her ear, a gesture I recognized from childhood. It was her tell, the little movement she always made right before another gold star, another trophy, another moment in the spotlight. Then, Dad turned to me. His smile tightened, just a fraction, just enough that only I would notice. "Maybe someday," he said, his voice dripping with thinly veiled disappointment, "you'll get tired of just freelancing from your couch and find a real career." The words landed like a physical slap. For years of building my business, of countless 16-hour days, shipping orders until my hands were raw from cardboard cuts and packing tape. All of it dismissed. In a single, dismissive sentence. I set my wine glass down, the stem feeling fragile between my fingers, and took a breath. Then I guess Brielle doesn't need my $3,500 support anymore. Silence. Just dead silence. Across the table, Brielle froze, her wine glass suspended halfway to her lips. Dad's fork clattered against the fine china, a stark sound in the sudden quiet. The Merlot in his glass actually trembled. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice suddenly sharp. "The monthly transfers." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. I've been sending Brielle $3,500 every month for the past 2.5 years. Dad's eyes darted between us, wide with disbelief. That would be over $100,000. $105,000 to be exact. I slid the phone across the table, the transaction history glowing on the screen. So Brielle could maintain the illusion of success. What illusion? Dad's voice rose, and a couple at the next table actually glanced our way. Her actual salary is $52,000 as a store supervisor at Nordstrom. I looked directly at Brielle, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. Not the $80,000 plus assistant manager position she's been claiming. Isn't that right, Brielle? Her perfect composure finally cracked. Her lower lip began to tremble. "Kelsey, please." Dad's face transformed right before my eyes. Confusion bled into disbelief, then hardened into something like shame. He stared at Brielle as if seeing a complete stranger. "Is this true?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. You see, 4 years ago, I started Cascade Trail Outfitters. From my 2-bedroom apartment in Tacoma, I packed eco-friendly hiking gear on my living room floor. My kitchen table was my shipping station. My friends thought I was crazy. My family? They just thought I was wasting my college degree. Last year, that little hobby brought in $620,000 in revenue, with $320,000 profit. I still drive my 2018 Subaru Forester. I still shop at discount stores. Every extra dollar goes back into the business. And at every single family dinner, I still got some version of, "When will you get a proper job?" I remembered Mom's voice when I was 8, explaining why she'd missed my school play for Brielle's dance recital. "Your sister needs more attention. You understand, right?" Oh, I understood. Just like I understood when I helped Brielle buy her college textbooks. Just like I understood when I covered her first apartment security deposit. Just like I understood when she called me, crying, about credit card debt 2.5 years ago. I had spent a lifetime supporting others while accepting my own undervaluation. I enabled Brielle's fantasy. I hid my own success. But not anymore. Brielle's tears started, right on schedule. The familiar manipulation tactic that had worked on our parents, on teachers, on boyfriends, and yes, even on me. Please don't cut me off, Kelsey, she whispered, her voice barely audible. My rent's due Friday. I opened my banking app again, navigated to recurring transfers. Then it's time you start living like someone who earns $52,000, I said, my voice cutting through her sobs, not $150,000. I tapped cancel recurring transfer and held up the phone so they could both see the confirmation. Dad watched in stunned silence as 30 years of family dynamics shifted before his very eyes. You've been lying to us, he finally said to Brielle, his voice hollow. Not lying, exactly. Brielle's mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Just stretching the truth. While stretching my bank account, I added. Dad turned to me, confusion etched in the lines around his eyes. Why would you do this? Give her this money while letting us believe that I'm the failure and she's the success. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. Good question. One I've been asking myself for 2.5 years. I stood up, dropping my napkin beside the untouched tiramisu. I should go. I have a shipment of hiking poles arriving tomorrow. My little freelance job, you know. The restaurant seemed quieter as I walked away, almost as if everyone could hear the glass house of lies shattering behind me. Later that night, my key fob clicked as I locked the Subaru. The parking lot concrete glistened with fresh rain, Seattle's perpetual gift. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my boots and dropped my bag on the kitchen counter. That tiramisu I'd been looking forward to all week? Uneaten. A $12 casualty of tonight's family implosion. The clock on my microwave read 9:17. Too early for bed, too late to pack orders. My mind refused to settle. I wandered into my home office, the converted second bedroom where Cascade Trail Outfitters began. I sank into my desk chair and opened my laptop. The Excel file, labeled Porter Family Support, stared back at me. 2.5 years of transfers, each one a $3,500 monthly reminder of my inability to say no. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A few clicks and I was scrolling through Brielle's Instagram page. The evidence I deliberately ignored for so long flooded the screen. March 2023, Brielle posing outside Nordstrom's employee entrance. Caption: Big promotion day. Assistant manager. Career goals. Making moves. April 2023, champagne flutes clinking at the Nest rooftop bar. When your bonus hits just right. Work hard, play hard. Seattle sunset. June 2023, a close-up of a Gucci purse. Treat yourself. Boss lady. Worth it. The dates aligned perfectly with my bank transfers. Each celebration, each purchase, each career milestone funded by money I earned packing hiking backpacks until my shoulders ached. I navigated to my email. Search. Brielle plus help. The original message appeared, dated January 17, 2023. Kelsey, I hate asking this, but I'm drowning. Credit card debt hit $18,000 and I'm 2 months behind on rent. I'll lose my apartment. Just need help for a few months until I get my finances straight. Please don't tell Dad. Love you, B. A few months. The phrase burned in my chest. I remembered the phone call that followed. Brielle sobbing about predatory interest rates, promising to create a budget, swearing she'd pay me back. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Brielle, you've ruined everything. I can't believe you humiliated me like that. I tossed the phone onto my desk. It lit up again. Brielle, call me. We need to figure this out before my rent is due. I ignored it and pulled up a folder of credit card statements Brielle had sent me when she requested that first loan. The spending pattern jumped out at me now. Restaurants, clothing stores, weekend trips to Portland and Vancouver. Not the spending of someone in temporary trouble, but someone living beyond their means by design. After my first transfer, her spending didn't decrease. It escalated. Spa weekends, designer purses, Sunday brunches at rooftop restaurants, while I ate peanut butter sandwiches between packing orders. My chest tightened as the full picture came into focus. The deception wasn't a spontaneous lie. It was a calculated, long-term strategy. Dad's voice echoed in my mind, responsible, independent, and a true professional success. The same words he'd used at family gatherings for years, while glancing at me with barely disguised disappointment. Dad, the enabler. Brielle, the deceiver. The perfect team, reinforcing a family mythology where appearance trumped reality. I opened another folder on my desktop, Business Expansion. Inside, a detailed plan for taking Cascade Trail Outfitters International. Shipping costs to Canada and the UK. Website translation services. Inventory increases. Marketing in foreign currencies. The projected cost for Phase 1, $35,000. Almost exactly what I would have sent Brielle over the next 10 months. This isn't cruel, I whispered to the empty room. It's necessary. For both of us. For the first time in my adult life, I considered what might happen if I invested fully in my own success instead of smoothing over family dynamics. The thought felt foreign, almost forbidden. My phone rang. Martha, my business mentor. I hesitated before answering. Kelsey, you okay? You never leave our Tuesday check-ins early. Family emergency. The words tasted bitter. About Brielle? Martha asked. I sat straighter. How did you know? Honey, I've wondered for years how she afforded that lifestyle on a retail salary. The math never added up. The validation from someone outside the Porter family hit me like a physical force. Martha continued, want some company? I've got a bottle of that Pinot Noir you like. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah, my friend since college, holding a bottle of wine and wearing her emergency support visit face. I opened the door. How did you know? Sarah hugged me. You sent a period after fine in your text. Dead giveaway. An hour later, Sarah and I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, business spreadsheets surrounding us like fallen leaves. She pointed to a figure on my international shipping projection. So, with the money you're not sending Brielle, you could fund this entire Canadian expansion by December and still have enough to hire a virtual assistant for the logistics. The possibilities unfurled before me, exciting and terrifying all at once. You've been the shadow investor in her lifestyle, Sarah said. Now you can invest in yourself. 3 weeks later, I was interviewing virtual assistants. A stack of unopened envelopes sat on my desk. One from Brielle, I can't make rent. 2 voicemails from Dad, the first angry, the second confused, the third tentatively curious about my online store thing. I hired Melissa, a logistics specialist in Portland with experience in international shipping. The first packages to Vancouver left my warehouse the following Monday. That night, I worked until midnight, both liberated and grieving. Freedom carries its own kind of pain. But as I taped the final box closed, I realized the weight on my shoulders was only inventory now, not family expectations. The path ahead felt right, even as it diverged from the familiar pattern of sacrifice that had defined my first 30 years. My phone pinged with an email notification. From Brielle. Subject, we need to talk. I set the phone down without opening it and returned to packing orders for customers who valued what I created. 3 days later, my phone buzzed for the 5th time that morning. Aunt Susan's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it and dropped the phone on my desk, returning to the shipping manifest that actually deserved my attention. That's the 3rd family member today, Sarah noted from where she was labeling boxes. My friend had volunteered to help with the unexpected surge of repetitive orders from Vancouver. Brielle's been busy. I stacked another box on the pile, calling everyone with the tragic tale of her financial abandonment. Classic Brielle. The emails had started after the restaurant confrontation. Distant relatives expressing concern about my troubling behavior. By week's end, Brielle had crafted a narrative worthy of a daytime soap opera, a struggling sister cruelly cut off during difficult times by a heartless, jealous sibling. Uncle Robert texted about family supporting family. Cousin Jessica called to remind me that Brielle has always been there for you. News to me, considering she borrowed my car for a weekend getaway in 2019 and returned it with an empty tank and a cracked windshield. The doorbell rang. Sarah peeked through the blinds and turned to me with wide eyes. "It's your dad." My stomach clenched. "Tell him I'm not home. Your car's in the driveway." I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door. Dad stood there in his pressed golf shirt, looking deeply uncomfortable on my modest porch. "We need to talk about your sister. Come in." I stepped aside to let him in. "I'm in the middle of packing orders." His eyebrows lifted as he took in the stacks of boxes, the shipping labels, the inventory organized across my dining table. "This is more professional than I expected." He touched a hiking pole with a finger. "You sell these and manufacture them. Sustainable bamboo core. Recycled aluminum tips." I didn't mention the 3 patents or the feature an outdoor enthusiast last month. He wandered through the maze of products. "Brielle says you're being unreasonable." "Does she?" I sealed another box with practiced efficiency. "Did she explain what she was doing with $3,500 a month while earning $52,000? She has obligations." "Like what? The Audi payments? The designer purses? The weekend trips to Portland with her friends from the country club?" Dad flinched. "She says she'll be homeless if you don't help. She'll need to downsize. Not sleep under a bridge." I printed another label. "There's a difference between helping someone and enabling them." After he left, I called Martha, my business mentor. "The UK distributor is in," she announced when she answered. "They want your entire winter line." My heart raced. "For real? 30% more than we projected." Her voice brimmed with excitement. "This means you can lease that warehouse space we looked at." Without Brielle's $3,500 draining my accounts each month, the business had exploded. International orders from Canada arrived first, then Australia. 3 weeks ago, I'd hired Jenna to manage customer service and Ben to handle shipping logistics. I signed the warehouse lease the following Tuesday. That afternoon, I arrived home to find Brielle sitting on my doorstep. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes red. She sprang to her feet when she saw me. "Finally. I've been waiting for hours." Her voice carried down the street. Mrs. Donaldson from next door paused while watering her flowers. "I have a key in my purse," I said quietly, unlocking the door. "You're ruining my life." Brielle followed me inside, her voice escalating. "I had to sell 3 of my purses. The bank called about my car payments." "Lower your voice." "Why should I? You don't care that I might lose everything. My apartment, my car, I didn't create this situation." I set my laptop bag down carefully. "I just stopped enabling it." "You think you're so perfect with your little business." Brielle's voice cracked. "Dad always said I was the successful one. You're just jealous." "Success isn't what you buy," I said, the words flowing with unexpected calm. "It's what you build." "Easy for you to say when you're making all that money." She gestured wildly at my modest apartment. "While I'm suffering." "You make $52,000 a year, Brielle. That's more than millions of Americans. Your suffering is self-inflicted." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. 2 hours later, her Instagram showed a post about toxic family members who don't understand financial hardship. 3 days later, Sarah stopped by with takeout and her laptop. "You need to see this." She opened a folder of screenshots. Brielle's social media history from the last 2 years. The posts told 2 stories: public declarations about financial independence and career success alongside snapshots of luxury purchases that appeared right after my monthly transfers. The timestamp on this promotion celebration dinner? Sarah scrolled through image after image. 2 hours after you sent her money last August. My phone rang. "Martha, turn on your email right now," she said. "REI wants a meeting. They're interested in carrying Cascade Trail products in their flagship stores." "Holy shit," Sarah whispered, reading over my shoulder. We were halfway through a bottle of champagne when my phone rang again. "Dad, I've been looking at your website," he said without preamble, "and I called that outdoor magazine that featured you." I braced myself for criticism. "You make more in a year than I did in 5. The admission hung between us. I didn't fill the silence. "I'd like to see your operation," he said finally. Your real operation, not just the boxes in your dining room. The next day, I gave him a tour of the new warehouse. He studied the inventory system, asked about profit margins, examined the manufacturing contracts. I didn't understand, he admitted, as we stood among pallets of hiking gear. I thought real businesses needed office buildings and dozens of employees. I valued what I recognized. He paused near a wall of international shipping labels. I also didn't understand my role in enabling Brielle's deception. His voice quieted. Or how I dismissed what you built. That night, I created a folder on my laptop. Inside, I placed sales reports showing 340% growth since cutting off Brielle's support. Photos of the warehouse. Profiles of my new employees. A parallel folder contained screenshots of Brielle's lifestyle changes, the Toyota replacing her Audi, the scaled-back social posts, the sudden interest in budget-friendly fashion finds. My email pinged with a new message from Dad. Subject line, important family matters to discuss. Thanksgiving at my house. My finger hovered over the accept button as I considered what awaited. The phone lit up. Brielle's name on the caller ID. I stared at it, calculating the cost of answering versus the peace of letting it ring. On Thanksgiving, the scent of roasting turkey filled Dad's house, mingling with cinnamon and sage. I adjusted the green bean casserole on the crowded counter, watching Mom fuss over the marshmallow topping on sweet potatoes. Some traditions never change, even when everything else has. Kelsey, would you check if we need more ice? Dad called from the dining room, where he was arranging place settings with military precision. I opened the freezer, wondering which version of my father I'd see today, the one who praised Brielle blindly for years, or the one who called last week asking genuine questions about my business margins. The front door opened and conversations paused. Brielle arrived, 40 minutes late as usual, but something was different. Gone was the Audi she leased last spring. Instead, through the window, I spotted a used Toyota with peeling bumper stickers. Her camel coat lacked the designer label she normally flaunted, and her purse wasn't the Italian leather she'd showcased on Instagram last month. Sorry I'm late, she announced, kissing the air beside Aunt Margaret's cheek. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on me with calculated precision. Traffic was terrible. Dad watched our interaction carefully, his eyes narrowing when Brielle hugged me with exaggerated affection. Kelsey, you look great. Business must be booming. I returned the hug without comment. I had canceled that transfer, and the physical changes in Brielle's appearance told stories her words never could. We gathered around the table, platters steaming between autumn-colored candles. Uncle Robert carved the turkey while Aunt Margaret distributed wine with generous pours. Conversation flowed around football predictions and Cousin Jenny's college applications. Before we ate, Brielle raised her glass, commanding attention with practiced ease. I want to say how grateful I am for family. Her voice carried the same cadence she used when accepting academic awards in high school. During hard times, we support each other. That's what family does. Her eyes settled meaningfully on me. The message couldn't have been clearer if she'd written it on a billboard. Dad cleared his throat. Yes, family support is important. Speaking of which, Brielle, how's work going? She dabbed her napkin against her perfect lipstick. Actually, there might be changes coming. The retail sector is unstable right now, and there's talk about layoffs. The dramatic pause that followed would make soap opera directors proud. Her gaze slid to me again, expectant. That's odd, Dad said, his fork suspended midair. I called your manager at Nordstrom last week. The dining room fell silent. Even Uncle Robert's knife stopped mid-slice. You did what? Brielle's voice pitched higher. I spoke with Karen Wilson. Interesting conversation. Dad set down his fork with deliberate care. She mentioned you've been a store supervisor for 3 years, never an assistant manager. Color drained from Brielle's face. Dad, why would you? Because I wanted to understand. His voice held no anger, only weariness. Since that dinner at Bellini's, I've been investigating what else I believed without question. Aunt Margaret leaned forward, eyes darting between them. What's going on, Thomas? Ask Brielle, Dad said, about her corporate success stories. All eyes turned to my sister. Her fingers trembled against her water glass. The economy's been difficult, she attempted, voice wavering. Everyone stretches the truth on social media. Stretches the truth? Uncle Robert repeated, eyebrows climbing toward his receding hairline. You mean those Facebook posts about your corporate success weren't true? The executive retreats in Vancouver. It wasn't exactly untrue, Brielle defended. I was working toward that position. Aunt Margaret studied Brielle's wrist where a watch glinted in the candlelight. So, Kelsey paid for this? She turned to me. You've been supporting her? I nodded once, unwilling to pile onto Brielle's crumbling facade. For a while. Over $100,000, Dad added, voice flat, while we all praised Brielle's success and dismissed Kelsey's business as a hobby. Brielle's eyes welled with tears, a response I'd seen countless times since childhood. The waterworks that charmed teachers, placated boyfriends, and loosened Dad's wallet. Today, they only deepened the damage. I never asked to be compared to Kelsey, she said, voice catching. I just needed help getting established. Established? Uncle Robert snorted. Kelsey built a business from her apartment floor while you spent her money on designer watches? That's enough, I interjected, surprising myself. This isn't about public humiliation. The doorbell rang, breaking the tension. Sarah arrived with a bottle of wine and a bright smile that faltered when she read the room. Sorry I'm late, she said, sensing the atmosphere. Traffic was terrible on I-5. Kelsey, I brought that article about the outdoor retailers convention. Your new hiking poles got mentioned. Dad pounced on the subject change. Kelsey's company is expanding into 3 new markets next quarter, he announced, pride evident in his voice. My daughter built something remarkable right under our noses. The words landed like a physical touch. My father had never described my business this way, never with this tone of undisguised respect. Conversation shifted to safer topics. Jenny's college applications, Uncle Robert's golf scores, the unseasonably dry autumn. Brielle excused herself to the kitchen, movement stiff. Dad followed moments later. Their voices drifted through the swinging door as I helped Aunt Margaret arrange pumpkin pie slices on dessert plates. I believed everything you told me, Dad's voice cracked. Made me dismiss your sister's real achievements because they didn't fit what I understood as success. You always expected perfection. Brielle fired back. What was I supposed to do when I couldn't deliver what Kelsey could? You pushed me to compete with her my whole life. That's not true. And you know it. Dad's voice dropped lower. We gave you every advantage because we thought you needed more support. Kelsey always seemed so capable on her own. The plates in my hands suddenly weighed 100 pounds. All those years I thought I wasn't enough, when really, they just thought I didn't need them. Brielle burst from the kitchen, mascara smudged beneath reddened eyes. I need to go, she announced, grabbing her purse from the coat rack. Brielle, we haven't had dessert, Mom protested weakly. I've had enough, my sister snapped, yanking open the front door. Thanks for the lovely holiday. The door slammed with enough force to rattle the autumn wreath hanging from it. Through the window, I watched her climb into the Toyota, shoulders shaking as she fumbled with her keys. Dad appeared beside me, his reflection joining mine in the glass. Have I been wrong about everything? He asked quietly. I turned to face him, seeing the lines around his eyes deepen with genuine confusion. Not everything, I answered. Just some important things. Back at the table, Sarah passed slices of pumpkin pie while Uncle Robert refilled wine glasses. Their conversation drifted around holiday plans, weather predictions, the Seahawks' chances this season. Dad cleared his throat, waiting for the table's attention. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, lifting his glass, to seeing people as they truly are, not as we need them to be. Our glasses met over the scattered remains of Thanksgiving dinner, and for the first time in years, I felt fully seen at my father's table. The Christmas tree in Dad's living room sparkled with the same vintage ornaments he'd hung since I was 5. Voices drifted from the kitchen, where Aunt Margaret arranged her signature sugar cookies on Mom's old serving platter. Through the bay window, snow dusted the lawn like powdered sugar. I adjusted the lid on the wooden box I brought, wondering if I'd made the right decision. 2 weeks before Christmas, and the family had gathered for our traditional pre-holiday dinner. Perfect timing for Brielle's latest performance. Everyone. Brielle stood in the archway between the living room and dining room, her voice carrying that practiced lilt that once fooled everyone. "I have an announcement." The room quieted. Uncle Robert lowered his eggnog. Cousin Stephanie stopped arranging presents. Dad watched from his armchair, his gaze more measured than it once was. "I've enrolled in business courses at the community college," Brielle announced, her smile bright but her eyes tracking reactions. "Winter semester starts next month." Aunt Margaret clapped her hands. "How wonderful, dear." I reached for my sparkling water, avoiding eye contact. "It's not cheap, though," Brielle continued, voice softening to that familiar tone that signals a request is coming. "The books alone are almost $400. And there it was. The subtle implication hovered in the air like cigarette smoke. Just a little help needed, just this once, especially since it's for education. Dad shifted in his chair. Unlike the old days, he didn't immediately reach for his wallet. Instead, he watched me, waiting. Aunt Margaret slid onto the couch beside me, her hand patting my knee. "Family helps family, Kelsey, especially during Christmas." The scent of her white shoulders' perfume filled my nostrils as she leaned closer. "It's just textbooks, nothing extravagant." Uncle Robert cleared his throat from across the room. "You've done well for yourself lately. Surely you could spare a little for your sister's education? Christmas spirit and all that." His glasses slid down his nose as he peered over them at me. My throat tightened. The familiar pressure built, the expectation that I'd cave, that I'd write another check, that I'd keep the peace. Brielle stood near the fireplace, her posture carefully crafted to appear humble. The oversized cashmere sweater was new, Target, not Nordstrom, her first concession to her actual budget. Her expression read as someone trying to improve herself, someone worthy of investment. Every eye in the room watched me, waiting for my response. The weight of their expectations pressed against my chest. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I'd like everyone's attention for a moment." I walked to the dining room table and opened my laptop. The screen illuminated with the presentation I'd prepared. "Brielle, I'm glad you're interested in business education." My voice steadied as I turned the laptop toward the room. "I have something better than textbook money to offer." With a click, the first slide appeared. The Cascade Trail Outfitters logo, beside RI's familiar emblem. Last week, I finalized a partnership with REI. Cascade Trail Outfitters will have dedicated floor space in 3 of their flagship stores starting in February. I advanced the slide, revealing growth charts with an upward trajectory that began precisely when I stopped the transfers to Brielle. Since redirecting my resources back into my business, we've seen 340% growth in just 6 months. Aunt Margaret's mouth formed a perfect O. Uncle Robert removed his glasses entirely. I clicked through photographs of the new warehouse, smiling employees packing orders, expanded product lines. "So, instead of money for textbooks, I'm offering you a paid internship in business operations." I looked directly at Brielle. "You want to learn business? Learn from someone who built one." The room fell silent. Dad leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on the screen displaying my quarterly revenue reports. "This is remarkable, Kelsey," he whispered, pride creeping into his voice for perhaps the first time in my adult life. Brielle's face cycled through emotions: surprise, embarrassment, calculation, then outrage. "I can't work for my sister," she blurted, cheeks flushing. "It would be awkward." Dad stood, his voice firm in a way I hadn't heard directed at Brielle before. "It's a legitimate opportunity. Take it or leave it." The family witnessed this clear choice: authentic help versus financial enabling. Even Aunt Margaret seemed to understand the distinction. Brielle's shoulders slumped slightly. "When would I start?" "Flexible hours around your classes," I explained. "Real mentorship, modest salary, actual experience you can put on a resume." "I'll think about it," she mumbled. "That's fair," I said, closing my laptop. Dad approached, resting his hand on my shoulder. "I've been introducing Kelsey to friends as my entrepreneur daughter," he announced to the room, his voice carrying more than necessary. "Should have done it years ago." Uncle Robert peppered me with questions about small business loans. Aunt Margaret asked if I could recommend investment options for her retirement account. Cousin Stephanie wanted to know if I had any openings in marketing. Brielle retreated to the kitchen, the spotlight having shifted completely away from her for perhaps the first time at a family gathering. Later, as we gathered around the table, Dad raised his glass. To the future of our family, may we all learn from Kelsey's perseverance and honesty. Beneath the table, Brielle's hand found mine, not grabbing, not demanding, but a gentle acknowledgement. When I looked at her, something had shifted in her eyes. Something real. "I'll start after New Year's," she whispered. "If the offer still stands." I squeezed her hand once before letting go. "It does." The wooden box I'd brought sat by my plate. Inside, a business planner with Brielle's name engraved on the cover and a key card to the warehouse office. Not a handout, but a hand up. Dad caught my eye across the table and nodded once. A small gesture carrying the weight of 30 years of misunderstanding, finally set right. The Christmas lights reflected in the window behind him. Stars in a dark universe, finally aligned. 6 months later, the giant red scissors felt substantial in my hands as I stood before the glass storefront of Cascade Trail Outfitters' first flagship location in downtown Seattle. A crowd had gathered, loyal online customers, local business owners, and a reporter from the Seattle Business Journal who was writing a feature on eco-friendly success stories. "Ready?" Martha whispered beside me, her silver hair catching the spring sunshine. I nodded, scanning the crowd until I found them. Dad and Brielle, standing side by side near the front. Dad gave me a thumbs up. Brielle offered a genuine smile, no trace of the practiced perfection she once maintained. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a Cascade Trail Outfitters staff polo earned, not gifted. The ribbon parted with a satisfying snick. Applause erupted as photographers captured the moment. "Congratulations," the business reporter said, extending her hand. "Your company's growth trajectory is remarkable, especially in the last 6 months." "What changed?" I caught Dad's eye before answering. I redirected resources where they could grow instead of enabling stagnation. 6 months since that Thanksgiving revelation. 6 months of restructured relationships and redirected investments. 6 months of truth. Later that evening, we sat at the same table at Bellini's, where it had all begun. The same white tablecloth gleamed under soft lighting. The same view of Puget Sound stretched like hammered silver through the west-facing windows. But everything else had changed. Dad raised his glass, signet ring catching the light. "To my daughter Kelsey, who taught us all what success really means." I didn't shrink from his praise. Didn't minimize. I just let the words settle where they belonged. Brielle, seated beside him in a simple blouse rather than designer labels, raised her water glass. "And to learning that appearances aren't achievements." I studied my sister. The B+ average in her business courses didn't come easily. Neither did downsizing to an apartment she could actually afford on her Nordstrom salary. Deleting her social media accounts might have been the hardest of all, those carefully curated galleries of false prosperity. The $105,000 was worth it, I said, surprising them both. Dad frowned. "How can you say that?" "After what Brielle did." "Because I learned what I'm worth." I took a sip of Cabernet, letting the tannins linger on my tongue, and what I'm not willing to sacrifice for approval anymore. Back at the warehouse next Tuesday, Dad arrived for his weekly visit. Since January, he'd been volunteering his accounting expertise to help local startups navigate tax season. Today, he'd brought lunch, his famous roast beef sandwiches, the kind he made for our school lunches in the 90s. "You've got another applicant for your scholarship program," he said, passing me the documentation. The Women in Business Scholarship Fund started small, just enough to cover books and supplies for one community college student. Now it supports 3, funded by a portion of profits I once diverted to maintain Brielle's illusions. Speaking of education, Brielle got that A on her marketing project. Pride softened Dad's voice. She used Cascade's recycled packaging initiative as her case study. I nodded, already aware. Brielle had shown me every draft, hungry for feedback, not validation. That evening, alone in my home office, I packed a special order personally, hiking poles with custom grips for a customer with arthritis. Some orders I still handle myself. A reminder of where I started. My phone chimed with a banking notification. Transfer received, $500 from Brielle Porter. Memo, first repayment. A small gesture, but one that represented a massive shift. I smiled, filing the digital receipt in a folder marked New Beginnings. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't humiliation. It's the quiet moment when the truth finally speaks for itself. When the narrative you've lived under for decades crumbles, replaced by something authentic. When you realize standing firm on your boundaries didn't end relationships, it transformed them into something honest. And in that honesty, something unexpected blooms. Not resentment. Not superiority. Just freedom.